Hello and welcome to Let's Talk About It with Taylor Nolan. Today I'm going to continue talking about food here. We've done a few episodes kind of focused on veganism and being vegetarian and one with hunting as well. So a little bit opposite here. We're just kind of going all over the map with food. So I think this is a really important topic that I know a lot of you have questions about, and I'm really excited to do this episode today. We're going to be talking with Toni, who has a new book out called Plant-Based on a Budget, and has also had a blog that all kind of started, which she became vegan at 20. And I feel like I can relate to her story a little bit here, but I'm super excited to learn some of the tips and a little bit more about Toni's journey. So thank you so much, Toni, for coming on the show today. And I'm really excited to get chatting and to learn a little bit more about you.
Thanks for having me on, Taylor. I'm excited.
Yeah. So you have this blog, Plant-Based on a Budget, and I'm curious, you said that you kind of became vegan at 20 and were living paycheck to paycheck when this kind of started happening. And so I'm curious if you can share a little bit about what that time in your life looked like and how becoming vegan came to light for you.
Yes, so it had started before I was even in my 20s. It started very slowly and gradually, and it all happened because I was running track in high school, and I had a high school that was located directly across the street from a Taco Bell, and I would go eat Taco Bell at lunch and then come and try to perform really well, but then I would get sick, and my concerned coach was like, "Hey, Toni, have you thought about not eating Taco Bell before you come to track practice every day?" And to me, I had never made the connection between what I put in my body and how it would affect my health and performance. And so I first cut out most fast food and red meat. And from there, I eliminated very, very, very slowly and over a long period of time animal products in general. Finishing with cheese in my early 20s.
Yes. No, I think that's a really important point to make here, that this was like a gradual thing of just kind of like phasing out some stuff. I think when a lot of people think of going vegan or going vegetarian, that it's like, okay, just overnight you need to completely cut that out. And I know for me, I am primarily plant-based. And I know for me that was like very much a slow over many years. And even today it's still something I somewhat struggle with, but I think that's a really important point to make there. And even thinking about the fact that, it hadn't even really hit you that connection of eating Taco Bell and not feeling well. And I think that goes to show kind of how disconnected we are with what we're putting in our bodies, and A, where that came from, but also B, how it impacts us.
Totally. It's so hard to forget the lifetime of what you've learned about food. And I always say, do it gradually, set yourself up for success, and go at a pace that's comfortable for you and for your family. Sometimes people will watch a documentary on Netflix and have this strong desire to do a whole lifestyle change overnight. And then when they feel like they can't keep it up, they feel like they failed, and they say, this lifestyle isn't for me. I can't do it. I tried it. Didn't happen. And so instead of taking that approach, I recommend one where you try meatless Mondays, you then go a full day plant-based and take little steps, get everyone on board. And it's just a more long-term successful approach.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I'm curious if you've spoken to that track coach that kind of set you on this journey a little bit. And does that track coach know where you are today now?
No. You know what? I've thought about it multiple times, and I don't even remember his name. I'm sure I can go back to the high school and find out. But it's really interesting how you meet someone and they change. They change your life completely.
Yeah. Sometimes they don't even know it.
Yep.
Yeah. There's, it's funny for me, there was a guy in my graduate class who had said something very profound to me. And, I still have never told him to this day, but I've spoken about him publicly so much. And it's very interesting how that can happen. And
are you still in contact?
We were for a while after grad school, but then, I moved out here to Seattle and to finish my program and stuff. And I haven't talked to him in many years. I don't even know if he knows the trajectory that my life then went on after school. I don't know if he knows about reality TV and all that stuff, but I would love to get reconnected to him. And that's something I always think about, like when I hear stories like yours where someone is able to say, it was really this really impactful moment I had with this one person. And then I'm like, well, wait, how do we let this person know? Like we need to write them a card or something.
Dear so-and-so, you changed my life forever.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you. And then, so that kind of all happened for you in high school. And then, in this journey of life that we take, your food habits, I'm guessing too, then were impacted by going to college. I believe in part of your story of establishing plant-based on a budget was struggling with low-paying jobs and student loans and all those kinds of things in early adulthood.
Yeah, so I didn't become fully plant-based until I was at my community college in Sacramento, and I joined a veg club for support. Mm-hmm. I was already vegetarian, and I wanted more of a community in that space, so I joined the veg club and met so many different people who had very diverse backgrounds, who were in a similar position to me. They didn't have a lot of money. They were really deeply rooted in their cultural foods and had family ties to it. And together we started exploring plant-based living, and we had potlucks and we would cook together and host vegan bake sales. And it was this community that helped me feel more comfortable adopting a plant-based lifestyle. And I strongly recommend for anybody who is exploring lifestyle change in general to find a community that will help you out. And whether that's through a meetup group or your college campus club or even Instagram. I know a lot of people find a community on Instagram or social media, Facebook groups. I think it's just so much more helpful to know that you're not alone. And I have a Facebook group I actually started because I kept on hearing from people who said that their families weren't supportive and they would give them grief. And so I wanted to create a positive platform for people who were interested but felt totally unsupported. And I wanted to create an inclusive environment which showered them with positivity. And so even with people who are not fully plant-based but are dipping their toe in it, they are totally welcome and supported.
Yeah.
So that's how it was for me. And I think that at that time, I began to look at it from a more ethical approach as well. I started for health reasons, and I also very slowly began learning about the animal portion of the industrial agriculture process.
Yeah.
And I didn't like it. And so it made it easier for me because I had already stopped eating meat to then let my guard down and not be as defensive, which I had been before, where I did have vegetarian friends when I was younger, and I'd be like, no, it's not for me. It's not my thing. I love meat so much. And when I stopped eating meat for health reasons, I began to be more comfortable hearing about that and consciously not supporting it.
Yeah.
And so that's something that has kept me vegan for so long.
Yeah. Yeah. I hadn't thought of that experience yet, but I think that's can ring so true. And I think it might even be difficult for some people who have listened to these several episodes where I have kind of talked about being plant-based and vegan and whatnot, where their guards might already be kind of up because they might feel like, well, no, I'm not ready to hear this stuff yet. Like, it's, I like my meat and that's kind of the way it is. And they have community and family that support that. And then once you do kind of start to take some of those steps towards it already, you're able to see more of it. And that's definitely, I I personally am plant-based, and, I just recently was in Calgary and went to this animal sanctuary farm, the Alice Sanctuary, and met with the founder of that, where she takes in these like abused and neglected and just like abandoned factory farmed animals. And just like sitting and meeting with all of them, like, first of all, they were all so affectionate after being so abused and in these really terrible situations. And similar to you, like, going more plant-based was more of a health thing for me, of just, I felt better and all of that. But then facing like the fact and making that connection that has been so intentionally broken and disrupted in our society, is like levels of painful to try to face that. And I think you're right. I think having some kind of a community around it is so important. I'm not sure what you're like. I'm curious how your family reacted to you, changing for health reasons and then going from changing due to ethical reasons. Like, if it sounds like you had that community in college, but how did family and friends outside of that react?
That's a really good question, but can I touch on something you said about the sanctuaries first?
Yeah.
Okay, so early on in my vegan journey, I started working at a farmed animal sanctuary, and it was the most profound experience for me to work one-on-one. And I remember I had just gone through this really horrific breakup, and I was just distraught. I was constantly crying, and we as a sanctuary gained custody of a calf who had escaped from a not so great situation. He lost his mother, and he was super afraid of everyone. And I remember I would go and I would cry in this pen because I was having my thing and he was having his thing. And he would, like, when we first started, he would sit all the way in his corner and I would sit in my corner, and we kind of just look at each other. And every day we got closer and closer and closer. And then one day he finally put his head in my lap and allowed me to pet him and just laid there with me. And I thought, this is such a wonderful, beautiful thing where he has suffered so much and he has trusted again. And I want to take note of that and model my behavior after his, because it was just really sweet. And it took a long time for him to gain that trust. And so, yeah, the things I've learned from animals and the way I've come to respect them has been amazing. But to answer your question about the family, my family, it took them a while. I think they thought for a long time that it was a phase in my life. And I have been unconventional in so many ways. My family is pretty conservative, and they're Mexican, and they're religious. And so I've been very different from what they thought they would expect from their own child. And in my whole family, my brother, me, we're both different than what they thought they expected. And so they slowly grow with us and learn about the lifestyles that we've chosen. And it's taken a while, but I remember, I think it was in my late 20s, my mom baked me a cake that was homemade from scratch, all vegan. She made this wonderful meal, and I thought, wow, this is really nice.
Yeah, that's
and I totally feel the love. Yeah, it had taken 10 years, but it's much appreciated still. And now they always have something for me to eat when I go over. They consider me when making reservations places, and those are all things I appreciate.
Yeah. And I think it's, important to try to understand and empathize that, like, just as the journey for you is not an overnight one, that it might also not be for friends and family to, like, accept that and to make those changes, because even when you change something so small in your life or something huge in your life, it is going to impact your interactions with everyone else around you. And I think it is important to acknowledge, where that can be difficult for them to experience as well. Yeah.
Definitely. And another thing to consider is that in certain cultures, affection is expressed through food sharing.
Yes.
And in my culture, that is the case. And so when my family makes me food, it's because they love me and they want to show me that they love me. And I'm totally the same. So I very much get that.
Mm-hmm.
And when I first rejected their food, I imagine that it hurt their feelings. Like that's part of it. It's not that they so much care that I've made a lifestyle change. It's that I'm rejecting their food and their affection.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's something that I still try to keep in mind when I go over to their house, that I bring something to share with them so that they can still share food with me. And then now they usually have something I can eat.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like food is such a community focused thing. Like we bond so much and we really come together over food, like just as beings. That's part of what helps connect us. And yeah, if you're eating different things or not eating something that someone's making you, especially with those cultural significances, if that's a word, it can definitely, I think, cause a little bit of a I don't even know, I'm blanking on the word, but some conflict there maybe to then deal with.
Okay, I want to take a little bit of a break here. Everyone is always asking me for resources, especially when it comes to talking about things like mental health and therapy. And I'm really, really excited to have BetterHelp as a sponsor here on the podcast. And I think it could be really helpful for some of you who are listening and maybe like to use the podcast as a sort of supplemental therapy. But BetterHelp actually offers online counseling from licensed professional counselors who specialize in all kinds of issues, no matter what you're dealing with, whether it's stress or relationships or trauma or LGBT matters, grief. There's really a counselor for any kind of issue on here that you might be struggling with. The professional counselors that you match with, it's a safe and private online environment. So anything that you share is confidential and it just makes it very convenient. So I know not everyone has the time to go in and see a therapist, but with BetterHelp, you can now get help at your own time, at your own pace. You can schedule secure video or phone sessions. Plus, you can also chat or text with your therapist. And this is the best part. If you're not happy with your counselor, you can just request a new one at any time, which I know is something people tend to struggle with when they're actually seeing a therapist, is not knowing how to communicate, that maybe this isn't working out. So when you use BetterHelp, it actually makes it quite simple to do. It's really a truly affordable option. And let's talk about it. Listeners now get 10% off your first month with discount code Taylor. So, I mean, why not get started today? You guys can go to betterhelp.com/Taylor and just simply fill out a questionnaire that will help them assess your needs. And then you'll get matched with a counselor that you'll love. Again, that's betterhelp.com/Taylor. And I hope you guys enjoy it. I mean, what better day to get help than today? So I hope you guys take advantage of this and get some help. But all right, now that I just wanted to share that with you guys, I think that'd be super helpful. And again, I'm always getting asked for resources for therapy, and I think online counseling can be a great option for some people. So make sure you guys check that out. And now we can kind of get back to the show.
I'm curious a little bit if you can touch on this. Part of how that's impacted like your dating or your relationships.
Oh, yeah. So I'm now married, but I was online dating for years and years. And I tried everything. I tried OkCupid and Bumble and Tinder and all the things that was set up. And when I first started, I wore my veganism like a badge. I would put it on my profile, vegan, blah, 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 like all of the descriptives that made up my life. And I realized that it was becoming a negative topic where people felt the need to say, look, I respect that you're vegan, but I'm not going to ever be vegan. And I was like, I didn't even ask you. We didn't even talk about food. It was just something that people felt the need to put out there. And I didn't want that. So when I changed it to vegetarian, it was like people were a lot more receptive. They didn't feel the need to talk about it. And I remember, oh my gosh, I'm such a hard sell, my dad would say, because I also don't drink coffee and I don't drink alcohol.
Same.
And so my dad was like, okay, so you're dating. You can't say, oh, let's grab a drink, or you can't say, let's go get coffee, or let's go get dinner. What are you going to say? And so I just thought it was so funny. And when I stopped wearing it as this really big, bold thing that made up my identity, and tried to just have a personality fit instead, it made it a lot easier to date because people are a little bit reserved. And also both drinking and food are such big social things. You go eat, there are all kinds of food trucks here and food festivals and people want to go experience those. They want to go to wine tasting. They want to go to breweries. And those things are not that fun for me because I can't have so many things. And so I totally understand why people wouldn't be so interested, but I am fun. I'm really nice. So I'm glad a few people have taken a chance on me.
Yes. Yeah. It's funny. One of the questions I was going to ask you a little bit later was if you did drink alcohol, because I hadn't in my previous conversations with people who are vegan or plant-based, we haven't touched on that. And to me, that's a very interesting topic of maybe being vegan or vegetarian and wanting to be very health conscious and like environmentally conscious, and then also to still drink alcohol. The alcohol piece is something I get a lot of questions on, and people have wanted to do a full episode on, and I haven't gotten to that yet, but I think this is a great opportunity to touch on that a little bit here, because I'm curious for you kind of how that started and if you have ever drank or if you have just never touched it and it's never been a part of your lifestyle or what.
I have never consumed alcohol, which is shocking because I am personally not religious. I didn't grow up in a community that did, like, I grew up in the opposite community where everybody drank.
Yeah, same.
I watched the people I love make very bad decisions that completely affected their lives, some forever, and decided that just was not a road I wanted to take. I know that my personality can be sometimes obsessive and addictive, and it's just not a road I want to go down. Yeah. And even now I've gone to AA meetings to support friends, and I've picked friends up from the club late at night. It's become such a big part of my life of what I don't want that I'm certain that it would never change.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's a really good point. And I know that's definitely been part of it for me, of just seeing how it can impact other people and knowing that, that would not be a good fit with me. And again, also kind of goes to the health aspect of all of this, knowing that red meat doesn't work well with my body, knowing that dairy doesn't really sit well with me, that, drinking alcohol would be just poisoning myself and like not something that I would enjoy or make me feel good. And I think it's important when putting something in your body, deciding and figuring out if that's something that's going to nourish you or, make you feel really crappy, whether it's physically or emotionally, because that can be very, very tough. And even going back a little bit to, when you started plant-based on a budget and that lifestyle of living paycheck to paycheck. And when I think back to myself in my very early 20s of being in grad school, being recently out of a relationship, paying rent for a single family home by myself, working at the Hustler Club as a promo girl, trying to pay my rent, going to the farmers markets was how I was primarily feeding myself. I was in that previous relationship, he was very well off, and so I didn't really pay for anything, and then was in this situation where I was really having to pay for everything, and car troubles, even how you had mentioned, and it really took a toll on me mentally. It was also a very specific point in my life where I looked at what I was putting in my body, how I can do this in a way that is affordable without sacrificing like my health. And it was a really tough time for me, but like emotionally. And so I'm curious for you kind of what that period was really like for you. Cause I mean, when we look at just kind of what you have to show for it, it looks very great. It looks like this very pretty, well put together. The book is absolutely gorgeous. But I imagine that there were some really tough times getting to this point.
It's wonderful that you mentioned that, because I think that social media has a very good way of distorting reality and making life look very polished. And I remember commenting to one of my friends about how that's something that I didn't like about social media. And she pointed out that if you look at my social media, I don't really share the not so glamorous parts of life. I only share what I mostly share food stuff, but it looks like I live a very comfortable life, and I do. I'm so grateful and privileged, but I have had many struggles that led to where I am now. And so what it looked like for me was I moved out of my house after high school, and I didn't have a lot of money. I didn't at that time. I was very much clashing with my dad. And so I moved out. It was one of those things where he was going out of town and he came back and all my stuff was gone.
Yeah.
And
that's real. That's a little bit more than clashing.
Yeah.
That's intense.
We're on good terms now, and he brings it up all the time. He's like, remember that one time where I came home and all your stuff was gone and you never came back?
Yeah.
And so I moved into a bedroom where I shared it with two other people. We had bunk beds and a twin bed in it. And it was like getting thrown to the wolves. You know, you just you're not prepared for it.
Yeah.
And I felt very young and inexperienced. And although I had probably more life experience than some of my friends, I still could have been better with more. And so I worked multiple jobs. I worked at the mall at Express. I worked at a shoe store called Nine West. And then I also worked as a part-time nanny. And there were times where I didn't have a car, so I'd have to bicycle, which is not fun when you're having to grocery shop, and everything is more difficult when you don't have money. So when your car breaks down, it's not like you can go get it fixed. When you're like hungry, everything is more difficult when you don't have a lot of money. And that was probably the most difficult part of my life. Which again, I feel very privileged to say that, because I have never been homeless or really hungry, but that was probably the most stressful time of my life. And I do think that I learned a lot about how to be frugal, how to save my money. I didn't have any experience in money management. So whenever I did get money, it was natural for me to go spend it on things I didn't need. And so it was in my mid-20s that I really learned how to manage money, to save money. And now I'm super lucky to have a backup of in case my car breaks down, I can dip into my savings and go fix it. Yeah.
It's, thank you for sharing all of that. I know it's not always easy to talk about. And I think on one hand, it is important to recognize where even sometimes in our low times, we do still have some privilege. But I also think it's really important to make sure that you're not necessarily like comparing your struggles to other people's struggles and in a way that could potentially be invalidating. Because it does sound like that was a really tough time. And I'm curious if you can think back to that time, if there was a way that you were able to practice self-care at all, or if you were just in like total survival mode of like, I need to make sure I have money to eat this, and I need to, make sure I get to this job and to that job, or if there was a time for you of like, I really need to make sure that I'm taking care of myself and that like, this is how I can do that.
Well, two things. First, it's good that you have mentioned the not comparing your struggles to others. I remember, so I know that you talk a lot about counseling and therapy. And I remember when I first visited a counselor, and I felt this guilt that what I was dealing with was not as severe as some of the other people I know who have received counseling. And I remember talking to my counselor about it, and she said the same thing, like, don't compare yourself. I just felt like I'm so privileged to have never had any, like the things I mentioned. I've not been homeless. I have sanitation systems and access to water and these basic necessities that other people unfortunately don't have. And so I felt silly kind of talking about, that I broke up with my boyfriend and we got in a fight and all this other stuff. And so, that was something I really had to work through, and I still work through today.
Yeah.
There's that portion. And then what was your question?
Of what self-care looked like for you in that.
Oh, self-care. Self-care is something that I didn't even know was a thing. Like, I didn't even know that is a thing. And I think I've looked into it, and since then, and I have learned a lot about how culture plays into that.
Yeah.
And how there is a big stigma in therapy, especially because certain cultures believe that, like, we were destined for what we have. God controls our destiny, and he has a path for me and all this other stuff. And so, and then also that family should be your support system. Like, if you have a problem, go talk to your mom.
Was that kind of how your family operated?
Yeah. And so I just didn't even know that was an option. And when I decided that I needed something more, and also something more like, something less biased, I looked into counseling services in my mid-20s and went to something that is here in Sacramento where I live, that is a nonprofit counseling service where they allow you to pay on a sliding scale.
Wonderful.
So if you don't have a lot of money, you can pay $20 per session. And if you make a little bit more money, you can pay $40 per session. And it's honor system. So you pay what you think you can afford.
Yeah.
And so I have now had the same counselor there for 5 or 6 years.
Yeah. That's so great. I mean, that makes me really happy to know that you were able to find that resource. And I think it's wonderful that you brought the fact that those kind of resources are available, because I think a lot of people struggle with, not only just trying to eat maybe plant-based on a budget, but also self-care on a budget and therapy on a budget. And I think it's important for people to know, that there are therapists and counselors out there who will see you on sliding scale fees, and that there are nonprofits out there doing stuff like the one in Sacramento that you went to. And that's amazing. I'm glad that you went there and that she was able to kind of help you unpack some of this stuff maybe. And yeah, I think it's on one hand great that we have this kind of trend in self-care, but it's also kind of a dangerous thing as well, because I think it's been used for marketing in a way that can actually be really unhealthy for us, even in terms of self-care, eat this whole pint of ice cream. You deserve it. You've worked really hard. And even self-care with have a glass of wine. You had a tough day. That's self-care. I don't know. I guess I'm just curious what your thoughts are on that. 'Cause it's like you said, you didn't really know what self-care was then.
Yeah. Well, as I mentioned, I can take things to the extreme. And so even my forms of self-care have been a little bit obsessive. And I've fortunately picked things that were ultimately healthier.
Yeah.
But I remember I was looking for an outlet. I was actually working at that sanctuary, and it was it was an hour and a half commute each way. And it was in rush hour. So I would feel so frustrated by the time I got to work and by the time I got home, and my social life just stopped existing. And I really liked my job, but I was killing myself to make it happen. And I started running so that I could relieve some stress. And rather than recreationally jogging, I started marathon training. It wasn't like, oh, I'm going to pick up running for fun. And I had never run distance running. I had always been a sprinter. And so that's a very different style of running. And it just, I think that even in our, like you said, even in our self-care, we can be a little bit and still have some unhealthy tendencies like that, where I could have just gone for a jog after work, but instead I needed to do something more extreme.
Yeah, no, I think that's really important to note that it's, yes, we can still be taking care of ourselves in one way, but that in that way, it might just be more soothing, and that can definitely be done in very healthy ways. And it can also be done in perhaps some more harmful ways. And yeah, it sounds like maybe it's through the process of this therapy that you've had, but are very self-aware in the fact that, that you do have this more obsessive personality, like you said, where I'm glad that you shared this example of the running. So I was going to ask, like, how did you know that you have more of that kind of a personality to like make the decision to stay away from things like alcohol and whatnot? But that's a great example of that. And so I'm curious what that looks like for you now that you do kind of know a little bit more about self-care and are aware of these perhaps more obsessive tendencies and whatnot. It sounds like consistent therapy has been a part of your self-care. And I'm curious, what else?
I think that trying to be a well-rounded person in general has made me a lot more mentally and emotionally healthy. I used to be, like when I'm in my earlier 20s, my relationships especially, I would find a new friend or a new boyfriend and then spend all of my time with them. And when that friendship or that relationship ended, it left me devastated, like unable to find myself because I had lost it within someone else. And now I know what that looks like, and I know the consequences of those actions, and I have worked really, really hard with all different types of things. Part of it was my regular therapy. Part of it was finding things that make me happy that don't involve other people, like hobbies. And I took up swing dancing.
Fun.
Swing dancing is my favorite.
I love that.
It taught me how to be more independent and social at the same time without depending on one person in particular to bring me happiness. And also in my relationship, which I believe my marriage is my most healthy relationship, I have given him part of myself, but I still keep a lot open. I have time for my parents, time for my friends, time for myself, time for my work. And that has made me just a more even, positive, generally happy person.
Yeah. I mean, I've never met you in person before, but from your photos in your book and from your photos on your Instagram, like you do very much have this smile that is like you are a happy, positive person. Not just like I'm smiling for the photo, but like you do have this very like warm, welcoming, positive kind of vibe to you. And I don't know if that's just because you're really great at taking photos, but it's what I pick up, and even a little bit more from this conversation. And yeah, I think that's something most people in like early 20s, and I think even in relationships, that's like really common to struggle with. I feel like it's kind of one extreme or the other, where we're either like full in it and are hyper focused on it, or it's like we're just really not about it. And I think that's a wonderful way to look at self-care that I don't think anyone's ever given me that answer to, of trying to make sure that you're like well-rounded in that way. Because yeah, I think it's important to be connected to so many things and to make sure that those connections are quality and that they're maintained. And I was thinking about this before we hopped on the call to start recording, and this has kind of made me think about it now too, as you talk about, making sure that you have time for hobbies and making sure that you are also being present in your relationships, not just your romantic one, but with your family and friends as well. Part of the plant-based on a budget is that we like our food to happen quickly and cheap and conveniently. As I was like going through that, I'm like, I know that that's what our society wants. I know that that's what we want when we're like so busy and on the go. But then I was thinking, in terms of my self-care, for me, it's like a major part of that is when I sit down and I really take the time to like make a full meal. And it's like this, hour-long journey of putting together this meal with all these different ingredients, most of the time really simple ingredients that I'm just taking the time to put together maybe. And was curious what that looked like for you, if it really is important for you to have the convenience of food in that way, or if you do look at it as, these are great recipes and budget friendly for people who maybe don't have a lot of time, but then also like maybe we do challenge ourselves to spend a little bit more of that time connecting with our food and around the table.
Well, I wish I could say I ate at home every single day, every single meal, but that is not the truth. However, I do still feel this strong tie to showing my affection through serving people the food that I made them. And so when I'm social, it is often at my house. And I cook dinner nearly every night, maybe 6 nights a week. And at that time, this is like the rule in my house that everyone knows. When I light the candle at the table, that means put your phone away, get it out of my sight. I don't want to see it. I will serve you a beautiful meal, but I ask that in return, you give me your company. And it's been really nice sometimes. And I know that both my husband and I, but I think a lot of people in general, they get into this like routine where they're constantly busy at work, then they come home and then they're exhausted and they whip up a meal together. And whether that's a fast or slow meal, it doesn't really matter. But what happens after when you serve the meal is what is really important. And a lot of times that is sitting in front of the TV. And so I don't want that for my family. I want to make sure that we're actually using that time to reconnect. We hadn't seen each other, talk to each other a lot all day, and that's our time. And whoever's joining us for dinner, that's our time to connect and share our lives.
Yeah. I love that idea of like when the candle's lit, it's like it's time to be present.
Yep.
I think I'm going to do that next time. Next time I have people over or when my boyfriend's back in town, that's going to be the rule.
It's so easy to just say, oh, I'm just checking my email really quickly. Oh, I just have to respond to this text message. And that really breaks the connection.
Yeah. Yeah. And I definitely agree and appreciate that notion of, regardless of how long it takes you to whip up the meal, that at least the enjoyment of the meal itself is a connecting experience for everyone to kind of gather around and enjoy. And actually, last time when my boyfriend was here, we peeked through the book and your Plant-Based on a Budget book that's out now. And as soon as we started flipping through it, we were like, oh my God, these all look so freaking delicious.
Thank you. It was actually really important to me to have a recipe photo for each recipe because I know that people eat with their eyes first.
Yes, absolutely. And even actually just sent, before we hopped on our call here, my girlfriend Vanessa had texted me and she was like, girl, I hate everything I'm eating today. And I was like, girl, eat some soup, and sent her a picture of the ginger butternut squash soup and
nice.
And just a picture of the cover of the book. And I was like, yeah, I'm interviewing with this like awesome girl today. And I'm really excited to talk more food things with her. And she was like, damn, that looks real good.
Well, I hope she likes it.
Yes.
Do you have a pressure cooker?
I don't. I have I feel like I have every other appliance but that.
That has been a real life changer for me because I am at this point in my life very busy and it still helps me. It helps me reach my goal in cooking because all I have to do is cut a bunch of stuff up, throw it in the Instant Pot and leave it be. I don't have to monitor the stove. I don't have to nurse it. It just does its thing, beeps when it's done. I let the pressure out and the meal is good to go. And I love it so much.
Yeah. See, I don't know if I just am a weirdo or if I just like need to be more productive in other ways. And I find that like my cooking time is the time I get to like escape that or what. But I don't know. When I'm actually like excited about cooking something and putting together a meal and like getting creative in that way, like I like just being in my kitchen. Like I don't want to be out doing other things. I'm like, I just want to be in here with the food and like figuring out creative ways to get it together. I don't know. It's a very like, I have said on the podcast many times that like my time to like do the dishes is like my time to really practice like being mindful. It's like a weird form of meditation for me where I'm not thinking about anything else except each dish that I'm placing in the dishwasher.
Wow.
And it's like this similar thing for me with cooking. Like when I'm cooking and putting something together, I'm not thinking about anything else that I have to do. I am like, I go into the kitchen and I'm like, I'm setting aside this time. I'm going to, put on my creative hat